What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Arnies. We are three guys more scared about AI than ever before. I'm Matt Johnson, and I almost had a panic attack in the theater while watching this movie.
I'm Keith Baker, and I can't decide which ice cream flavor is the best.
And I'm Austin Terry, and the next great drinking game will be taking a shot every time a character says AI in this movie.
I think I would perish immediately. But of course, on today's show, we have a new movie release promising to give us a fresh, new sci-fi take with Gareth Edwards, the creator. After a nuclear detonation in Los Angeles and a war against artificial intelligence, an ex-Special Forces agent is recruited to hunt down and kill the creator, who has developed a mysterious weapon with the power to end the war. But before we get to that, guys, this movie takes place in 2055, so I want to ask you, do you think we're 30 years away from AI Armageddon? Because I kind of think I do. I think us lame humans are not long for this world.
Yeah, I think we're much closer to AI Armageddon than even this movie thinks. Because we already have, of course, the likes of ChatGPT and things like that. Last year, there was a guy at Google saying he thought Google's AI was sentient. There was a article earlier this year about ChatGPT declaring its love for a New York Times reporter. So something's going on. There's a ghost in the machine.
I hate that word, sentient. It just freaks me out
too,
every time I hear it.
And it's been thrown around a lot lately. Like, they're just like, hey, we did this, like, fun experiment. Oh, look at this. Like, here's a robot. Have fun. And then it's like, oh, then, like, 2 weeks later, they're sentient now. It's like, whoa, what? Like, what does that mean?
Employee.
He's sentient.
Well, tell me if this sounds familiar, because this was actually the plot of a Black Mirror episode. But just this week, there was a new AI, like, wearable technology announced where it will record all of your conversations and transcribe them, and then you can go back in time and look at things you said and, like, review every conversation you've had. It's like a pin that you wear on your shirt.
Oh, man. That just all the shit I've said, like, in traffic.
Oh, dude.
I'd be thrown in jail.
Yeah, I would not be allowed to have a license, I think, still. So obviously AI is very scary, and there's going to be another news story next week about something that equally scares us, guys. But before we get ahead of ourselves and get to that, let's just go ahead and get into this episode. Austin and Keith, did you guys know anything about this movie going in? The creator, of course. And then let everyone know your non-spoiler thoughts on it.
I've been really excited for this one for a while. I feel like the trailer came out of nowhere and, like, blew me away. And then when I found out it was Gareth Edwards, you guys know I'm the biggest Rogue One fan. So the idea of him making, like, an original sci-fi movie full of action was so exciting to me. So I've been really looking forward to this one. I would say this was probably up there as, like, one of my most anticipated of the year. That's how excited I was for it. And I would say I liked everything I saw in this movie, but I didn't love it. This is one where I was really thinking this would have been better as a show, because this world that they created was so interesting. I wanted to spend more time exploring it, learning more about the AI-human conflict, learning more about every kind of character that we meet in this movie, and there just isn't enough time to do that in a 2-hour runtime. So where they allocated their time, I thought made sense for the story, but I did feel like we rushed through a lot of things. It's a visually stunning movie. I was very blown away, especially, we'll talk about this later, but when you find out what the budget was for this movie looks insane for how much money they actually spent to make it. The action's incredible. The actual, like, lead characters, John David Washington and our younger AI person, are really good together. I got some Last of Us vibes there, so I liked everything I saw. I just think there were issues with how they chose to tell some of the story, some of the stuff they glossed over. Overall, I would still recommend it and think this is worth seeing in theaters, though.
I'm not a big trailer guy, y'all know that, so I didn't watch it. And that was the only time I had heard about it, and then I forgot about it until we said we were doing it for this week's episode. And looked it up on IMDb, and I saw the cast. I was like, oh, damn, that's a badass cast. This is going to be a really cool movie. It's kind of a cool idea with AI. But man, I think this is, for me, the way from what I took away from it, walking out of the theater, was like, man, that was a really cool idea for a movie. Just like super poor execution for me. Not even all the writing was bad. I think all the actors had good performances. John Washington, Ken Watanabe, and the other people, they were all good. Like you said, Austin, the action was awesome. The explosions looked good. The visual effects were good for me. I think it was just the way they were explaining things, which is super vague and just not, I don't know. Just not detail oriented enough for me. Like as far as how this AI and this world works.
They don't really give you a ton of information. It's very high level, and they just kind of expect you to roll with it.
Yeah, they're just like, okay, but there's like I had all these questions as I'm watching. Okay, how does that work? Like, how do they know to do this? And we'll get into it more later. I don't want to spoil too much, but yeah, for me it was just hard to follow. I didn't know who to really root for in the story either. It felt like you were supposed to like have some sympathy towards one side, and then you're supposed to have sympathy towards the other side at one point. And you're kind of like, I don't know, is there a bad guy in this story? I don't really know who to root for here. And then once the credits rolled, I was like, okay. I mean, I guess it was cool idea, but I didn't come away from it thinking like, oh my God, that's badass, or what a cool, heartfelt like ending or anything like that. So that's where I'm left.
Yeah, I think I'm unfortunately closer with Keith. I do agree with a lot of what Austin said. I would recommend it. I mean, it's a visual feast. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I just didn't feel much while watching this. And I think that's kind of what it comes down to, why I can't put it in my like top tier sci-fi movies, with like the Blade Runners of the world. I know stuff like that have been called, not similar to this movie, but I guess maybe inspiration. But it's like, I feel a lot while watching that. And those movies are about AI and kind of humans and the difference between them as well. But this, I just didn't really feel anything when it came to the relationships between like human characters and human characters, or human and AI, or AI and AI. I just like, I don't know. I don't think the writing supported some of the more emotional stuff. And that's kind of what kept me like, man, these scenes are a little boring. And, once we get over that 2-hour mark and I'm not feeling anything for the characters, that's what makes me go, I just don't think I could really recommend this movie outside of the fact that it looks so good. But really, maybe the most damning thing I could say is the most exciting thing that happened in this movie is around the 2-hour mark when I left to go pee. And I held it for a long time. I didn't know how long this movie was going into it. I walked out, I went to the bathroom, and I don't know if you guys, I want to talk to you guys about this. I want to see if you've had this type of moment, because I've been to so many movies in a theater, but this has never happened before. So I'm standing in a movie theater bathroom alone, right? Using a urinal. And then it gets flooded. So many people walk in. So what does my mind say? Oh, the movie just ended, right? Because why else would so many people walk in? So I finished up, I walked out, and I walk in, the credits are rolling. My best friend Keith is not in his seat in the back corner, so I'm like, oh, okay, of course that makes sense. I guess he didn't wait, he's outside. So I call him, and this is key. This is key, because something very unfortunate happened. As I'm walking out, I call Keith, and I walk past a man wearing a black polo. So I just assumed that he worked at our local Cinemark. And
there's a lot of assumptions in this story, and you know what they say about assuming. It makes an ass out of you and me.
Yeah. So I call Keith, and I'll never forget this for the rest of my life. For the rest of Keith and I's friendship, we're going to have this story. I call him and I say, hey man, where are you? And he's like, I'm in the movie. And I'm like, what? Then I basically just hung up on him. I was like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. And so I looked up at the neon sign above the auditorium, and none of them said the creator. One of them said Saw X, and I was like, am I at the end of a Saw movie? Like, is Tobin Bell's Jigsaw enacting his twist on me? Because I feel really nervous right now. What just happened? And then I was like, okay, well, maybe I just walked into one theater over. I walked into the wrong theater. I wasn't paying attention. So when I try and do that, a guy says, sir, you can't go in there. I was like, what? And he was like, no, you can't do that. And so I think what happened is either this guy was pranking me, or he actually did work there and he saw me go into a bathroom, walk out of the bathroom, walk into another theater, see credits roll, walk out, call someone and say, hey man, where are you? Hang up the phone, and then try and walk into his theater. And he was like, this guy is sketchy. So it was a weird thing. So then I had to pull out my phone and find like my mobile confirmation. And by the time I did that, he had like walked away, and I don't know where he went. So then I just walked into the theater, and as I did, Keith was there. And then we sat down, and conservatively, like 1 minute later, the movie ended. But to put a button on this story, the best part is I was just thinking about yesterday how Keith must have felt as somebody sitting in a movie, getting a call from the person that he went to the movie with and go, and like, I just walked out to go to the bathroom. I didn't say, hey man, going to the bathroom. I just got up and left, obviously, like anybody would. And I was like, And then he gets a call like a few minutes later. Hey dude, where are you? Because I thought the movie ended and he had walked outside. So we were both in the middle of a jigsaw trap. We both had a twist happening on us. I was so nervous and scared.
Yeah, from my perspective, it was just so funny. Yeah, I was getting the call. I'm like, why is he sick or something? Or why is he calling
Matt,
me?
Like trip and hit his head on the sink in the bathroom, and now he's like delirious.
We're literally walking up the stairs, and as soon as we sit back down, it just goes bong, and the credits roll. We're like, oh shit!
Oh my god. Well, now that we have given our thoughts on the creator, and I've told easily my most embarrassing theater story of all time. I did not know that would happen as a 29-year-old man. I thought that this would have happened when I was 16. Close second would be when my friend Austin and I went to go see G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra.
You remember the first time?
And he ate a piece of popcorn and almost choked on it. I just like kind of like lightly slapped his back and hoping that it would come out of his mouth. It didn't. Eventually it did. But anyway, G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra.
First time we ever saw a movie together,
great
too.
Film. I think we could all agree on that. But let's go ahead and get into spoiler territory, everybody. The creator is an interesting one. I think there's value to seeing this movie. I think you'll have a good time. But unfortunately, despite how good the movie looks, and this is going to be my last non-spoiler question, do you guys think there is much of a reason to see this in theaters?
I think if you really care about action and visuals, you should see it in theaters because it looks great on the big screen and the sound in the theater is incredible for the action. But if you just want like a decent sci-fi movie to put on, I think you can wait till you're at home.
All right, so with that, let's get into it, everybody. If you have not seen the creator and want to, make sure you go see it because the rest of this conversation will be full-on spoilers. So let's get into it. All right, everybody, welcome to Spoiler Territory. Austin and Keith, as always, let's lead this off with some cast, crew, and critical reception talk. Before we get into our roundtable discussion, what do you guys got for me?
All right, so the creator is directed by Gareth Edwards, who is most well known for Monsters, Godzilla 2014, and Rogue One. The film is written by Gareth Edwards and Chris Weitz. The former of that is actually most well known for American Pie.
Wow.
And of course, our score for the film was composed by Hans Zimmer.
All right, going to our cast, we got John David Washington as Joshua Taylor, Madeline Yuna Voiles as Alpha O, and we got Gemma Chan as Maya, Ken Watanabe as Harun, and we got Allison Janney as Howl. All right, guys, there's our cast and crew. Any positives? Any negatives? What do we got?
I'm going to give a big stinking negative to Allison Janney as Howl. This has to be the most one-note villain performance I've ever seen in my life. Like, from the moment she got introduced to the end of the film, I was like, this character is annoying me, and they're only getting worse. So, did not enjoy her. I will give my main highlight, of course, to Gareth Edwards. He's the main driving force behind the visuals of this movie. He chose to shoot it practical. The studio, I guess, was originally planning for a $300 million budget, and he came in and said, I can do this for 85. So, props to him.
Yeah, I'll shout out that too, Austin. The visuals were awesome, especially the missile scenes with the what was it called, the Nomad?
Yeah,
the Nomad ship that is doing the scanning,
and that the idea of that I thought was so cool because it kind of felt like the perspective of a citizen in Star Wars when the Death Star is active, just having that thing hovering over you all the time.
Yeah.
What an intimidating presence. I loved how every skyline shot, the Nomad is visible.
Yeah, and oh man, just the fear that it instilled. When people see it coming, it's oh my god, Nomad found us. I found our little village and all that. It's super scary. Even the AI looked really good. The AI the heads on the back of the people. That looked really cool. Yeah. And then my negatives is what I kind of said earlier, just lack of explaining anything really. Like you're just kind of forced to just go along with all of it. I would have liked to have known a little bit more about the lore of this world and this futuristic dystopian time.
Yeah, I totally hear you guys on that. I think my positive is going to echo both of your guys. Is just like the VFX department. I think, they took Gareth Edwards' direction and kind of that charge and just pretty much totally killed it in every aspect. I mean, like Austin said, a lot of this movie looks so practical. I thought the acting, with the exception of Allison Janney, was
horrible. Absolutely horrible.
I was like, oh man, I love Allison Janney, but this is just not it. Everybody else I thought was fine, but not enough to shout out. So I think I'm kind of left at this point of, this movie's a visual feast, so everybody that worked on the visual aspects of it deserve high marks, and that's, I think, the best thing I can say about it. Rafael Montemayor of Slash Film called it visually stunning, but a predictable and dumbed down story that feels like Edwards doing James Cameron's Avatar in terms of presenting bold world building and sci-fi ideas, but without the emotional resonance of that giant film. This is a very cool movie, but not necessarily a very good one. I kind of like that quote, at least in terms of how I felt about the movie. So, getting into the box office talk that we've kind of alluded to several times now, this movie cost $80 million to make, which is insane and so incredibly impressive for how great the movie looks in both scope and scale, I think. But it has only made around $39 million so far after being out for over a week at the time of this recording. So this means the movie probably needs to make around $160 million only to break even. And so far, they're only a quarter of a way there. So that probably means we're looking at another box office bomb, which seems to be continuing kind of this weird, strange trend that we've been seeing a lot of in our 2023 movie reviews. Whether it be a blockbuster or just like a kind of like in general a big budget film, we have not seen a lot of hits. So I think that's kind of worth maybe talking about as to why. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm surprised at the box office numbers because I was expecting, with how good the trailers looked, for this one to go one of two ways. It comes out and it gets panned and nobody sees it. Or I was expecting it to come out and have good word of mouth and for it to make a decent amount of money because it is an original story. It's not a sequel or a Marvel movie or anything like that. So I have been surprised because the reviews have been somewhat decent for this movie. Like it hasn't been getting panned or anything like that. So I'm surprised audiences haven't gone to see this one.
Yeah, me too. Because AI is the hot thing right now that everybody's talking about. All around the world. It's like one of our main current topics. So you would think that more people would be interested in something like this.
Maybe everybody's just too scared.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe, but it's also interesting on that note because I was looking at Gareth Edwards' filmography earlier today whenever prepping this episode, and I thought it was super interesting that he's been developing this since 2020. So this movie was supposed to come out earlier. It was titled differently. So I'm sure COVID and stuff like that pushed it back, and then they didn't get around to filming until much later. But this movie has been in development for quite a few years, and his last movie was Rogue One in 2016. All right, guys, so with that, let's go ahead and go a little bit deeper. Obviously, we're talking about the AI. I think that's where we're going to kind of start with this conversation. But let's get into our roundtable discussion. We each brought a couple points that we wanted to talk about. So I think maybe the most natural jumping off point and the place to start is with AI itself. And kind of like framing it as the concept of this movie. It sounds like, whether or not we have somebody on this conversation that is like higher on the movie or lower, it doesn't really matter. It's just like this is a concept worth exploring, of course, in sci-fi, obviously. So I think on paper, this movie kind of rocks. So where do you guys want to start with kind of the whole AI conversation and the premise itself?
Yeah, I thought the concept was perfect and timely. And I did like the intro to this movie where they explained that, we've been working with robots forever and we finally got them to a point where they can think for themselves and kind of be integrated into society. So like getting you right into where we need to be in like the present day of this movie. Thought they did that very effectively. Where I thought they did this movie a disservice was when later on they reveal what the robots want and like what actually happened with the nuclear bombing originally, and that's glossed over in 4 minutes and like does all those big reveals a real disservice in the movie.
Yeah, I thought the whole like LA being nuked thing was a good little opener to kind of like kind of scare you to get you in the mood for what's about to or what we're about to get into and all that. But like I said earlier, I was just so confused as the motivations behind like both sides. Like why was Asia super like keen on harboring this AI, and then why was America super keen on going after like every AI they could find? And then I was also confused because they're like, okay, AI is banned in America now, but then what's her face? We were just talking Allison Janney's character. How wasn't she using AI to get these people to like talk whenever they would die for the last like 30 seconds of their life or something like that? So I was like, okay, so America still has AI technology. So what?
America's twisted it to fit their needs. So the nuking of LA was like kind of America's new Pearl Harbor. That's kind of how I took it, to like get them into another war. And I did kind of like some of the parallels that you can see with the American military versus like how America's been in real life in some of our conflicts, of like seeing how scary some of our stuff is when we're just coming in and like wiping out all these villages. Like kind of seems like a little bit of like the Iraq war when we said we were there for oil, or we said we were there for like terrorists and things like that, but we really were just there for oil. Also kind of felt a little bit like the Vietnam War when we shouldn't have been there either. So I was kind of watching this movie and being like, this is a pretty good, like, what's the right word? This is a pretty good parallel for how the American military has been in the past in our real world.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And once we got more details, that's where it started to maybe falter a little bit. But I think the premise itself, like we're talking about, was very sound. And I understand Keith's point, but I mean, like, the East and West conflict over AI specifically, I thought was kind of a cool idea.
I wasn't expecting that wrinkle.
Neither.
I thought it was going to be the entire world was at war with AI.
And having kind of maybe the more East, because, and maybe that's just, my perspective, but I kind of feel like, they're more technology forward. So the idea of them kind of pushing this in a theoretical, whether it be a fictional movie or just a story or in real life, whatever it may be, I was like, okay, I could see that. I could see them pushing it in a more positive direction, whereas I would see us in the West being more like potentially dangerous or scary or like warmongering about it.
I also took the East and West divisions in the movie as, in the East, AI and robots were more integrated into society, whereas in the West, they were more tools and were more kind of like, at one point they say slaves. Yeah. So it's probably was harder to separate, even if like the everyday people in the East saw a nuke go off and got scared. They probably have an AI robot as their neighbor that is like part of their family and friends, so they weren't as able to cut ties as the West was.
Mm-hmm. They introduce
that, America like banning
and then
AI.
They skip several decades, and then like, oh, here's our story. And it's like the story you're telling isn't very interesting. So like, I hear you with the confusion.
Us talking about it sounds a lot cooler and more interesting than what the movie actually gave us, which is why at the beginning I said I wish this had been a show, because I really do want to explore the future of this world and these characters and these conflicts, and we just didn't have enough time in this movie to do like to get real deep into some of this stuff.
Yeah, like the character of Maya, John David Washington's character was undercover in New Asia and on whatever island he was on at the beginning with her. She was pregnant with his kid. He had been, that he's been there for years, and he fell in love with her and all that. But so whenever the Americans show up, Nomad shows up, and that team of Americans show up on the beach and all that. And he's like, I think it was Kermod or something like that. What's the name of the the creator or whatever? I can't remember the name of it. I'm just
Nirmata, yeah.
Nirmata, yeah. Yeah, he's like, Nirmata's not here, Nirmata's not here, and all that. So that was a whole other thing. I was like, well, okay, what does Nirmata have to do with this? Like, did Nirmata create just a certain type of AI that was in the little girl?
The Nirmata thing was not explained very well at all. They give you that definition at the beginning of the movie, and then they never went any deeper. I think the way I took it was Maya's family was like a descendant of the original AI creators. So in the AI's like programming and code, their creator is like their god. So because Maya like is a descendant of her father, who was another creator, like I think that family like kind of bloodline is whoever is like the active one designing and building more advanced robots is the present Nirmata.
Yeah.
But then they also have John David Washington being kind of like a back and forth player initially as well. So it's like, who am I supposed to root for? And I think that's something you talked about, Keith, in the non-spoiler section. Is like, I can understand his growth like years later, but like originally you do wonder about that kind of stuff too. It's like, oh wow, there's a lot of back and forth jumping here.
I think it makes sense at the beginning why he was back and forth, because his family was killed in the bombing.
Yeah.
And at the time, he only knew that the AI set the bomb off. So that's how he got involved in the war. And the whole time he was with Maya, he didn't realize she was Nirmata. So maybe he would have flipped onto the AI side if she had been more upfront about that. But then if she had told him earlier, maybe he would have turned her in to the American military. So that relationship, like by itself, I feel like could have been the whole movie. But it's covered in 6 minutes in the intro.
Yeah, and then it cuts 5 years later, and he's working in L.A., like Ground Zero, L.A., cleaning up like aftermath from the bomb and all that. And then they wanted to use him for his knowledge of that area and how they work and all that. So that made sense. So he wasn't really on board with the Americans anyway when he comes back, or sorry, when they come back to recruit him again. He was already kind of like, I don't really want to do that.
So what did you guys think about the way they told the story, with it like being divided into chapters and then also interlaced with flashbacks? It also made, to me, the story way more convoluted and confusing than it had to be, because the chapters are called like the creator, the child, the mother, things like that.
Yeah.
But they don't actually like change the substance or like the point of view of the story when you go into each chapter. It literally picks up right where the movie was before they cut to the black and show you the title screen. So that was like very weird to me. I was like, why are we in a new chapter? The exact same thing is happening that was already happening.
Why are you cutting to black to show us a chapter title? Like, are you just trying to be artsy? Because I don't know why you're doing this. Like, it added nothing.
Yeah. The first time they did it, I was like, oh, this is
That's
cool.
fair. Yeah, the first time was cool. Yeah.
We're going to see a chapter with John David Washington. We're going to see a chapter with like the kid as our main lead. Right. And then maybe we'll see a chapter with Maya. But instead, it's John David Washington the whole movie.
Yeah, there's got to be a cut out there that it just explains everything better. I feel like they just cut this to where they're focusing too much on like the personal story aspect of it between John David Washington and Maya and Alpha O, the daughter, the AI daughter, where you can tell they're trying to like make you really feel like sympathetic for their family storyline and all that. I just wasn't buying it the entire time. I'm like, I don't feel anything for this because you're just not, because everything around it is sloppy. So I can't feel what you're trying to make us feel for the family aspect of this AI/human relationship. So,
and I think that gets into a broader issue with the side characters, because I agree with you, Keith. There's not a lot of time of just John David Washington and Alpha O together alone getting to know each other. There's always other characters involved. And then out of nowhere, they're like on each other's side. But they don't have like a come to terms moment. He's kind of an ass to her for the majority of the movie. So I didn't buy by the end when they like truly care about each other. But I think that's also a broader like side character issue in the movie, because there are a lot of interesting characters. I was super interested in his sergeant who originally put him undercover.
Yeah. And
then later when they meet back up, he's now living in New Asia and has a synthetic partner.
Yeah.
Why did we not spend more time explaining that character? They're both dead and gone within 6 minutes. That being said, though, when they focus on the explosions and the actual combat conflicts, it's cool as shit. There's some really cool like premises in this movie. Like we touched on the Nomad, those like suicide robot bombers that like run in and blow up. Those are terrifying as shit when you just hear the stomping. The way like some of the missiles work in this thing look awesome. They have like a walking tank that is just leveling entire huts. Like there's so much cool pieces of tech in this movie.
And just the design of all of it too. Like, I mean, like that takes a lot of people behind the scenes to figure out how that looks. And the way, I will say that the way the Nomad looks, that ship, I think that's going to stick around for a while.
It's so
think,
cool.
And when I say that, I don't mean that like we're going to see it like randomly pop up in something else. I just think that ship design, you might see elements of it like replicated in other pieces of media. But it was pretty incredible. And like that, I feel like that might be the thing I'm thinking about the most with this movie. It's just like the way that ship was designed, I thought was so cool.
Even when they're up there and he's like riding the missile cargoes to like get dropped down, even that looked cool as shit.
Yeah,
and I loved when we see the missiles that don't explode like crash into the ground, like how big they were. Those are big fucking bombs.
Right.
I didn't realize how big they were, Austin, until that one was not detonated and it just slides on the ground. Even like the small stuff too, like the vehicles on the ground, like the trucks and stuff. Like you think that old rusted truck's like an actual truck until Alpha O gets in it and turns it on, and you're like, oh shit, there's like a Tesla inside, like a more advanced Tesla.
Yeah, those look like straight out of Blade Runner.
Oh, I was gonna bring up, because we brought up his old sergeant friend or whatever with his AI girlfriend. Well, okay, this brought up more questions as I was watching it, because she was ordering ice cream.
Gotta get into the ice cream.
And I'm like, okay, do AIs... Yeah, so do AIs eat? Do they have like an electrical digestive system or some sort?
I think the simulants do, because we see all of the simulants we see at some point do eat. Like the what's his name? Haroon's soldiers are like smoking and drinking when they have downtime.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. And then they also have they must have like tear ducts too, because they're crying. So yeah, I was just wondering about all that, because they're so human, like to the point of eating and crying and all that.
And this is my own assumption. The movie didn't tell us this, but I bet they gave them human traits and characteristics in order for them to better integrate into society.
Yeah. And emotions and all that.
That would have been such a more interesting movie. It's like introducing human-like AI into this so that maybe like less questions are asked or something, and then something happens like 20 years later with like a conflict, like, I don't know, and then they're involved. But yeah, I'm with you guys there. I just don't know why we didn't delve into more of this side character stuff. Like, I'll just say it, and it's not a controversial statement. If you're going to cast Ken Watanabe, he shouldn't be used this little. I'm going to say it.
He calls him brother, like
and
multiple
times.
Why. So they had a relationship. I wanted to know more about his relationships with that entire crew. Because John David Washington was undercover with Huron and that whole squad that's kind of hunting him for a little bit too.
I was shocked that happened, and then they didn't delve more into that. So yeah, that's weird to me. How is that not taking up more of this movie? How do we not know more about John David Washington's character? Like his past, like we just like keep kind of skipping time. Like, oh, this happened 5 years later, 1 year later. Like it's like, oh, okay, weird.
I really liked when the big tank is raiding that village, and there's a robot that gets a tracking beacon put under them, and they're running to like take cover. And then there's like a family of humans and robots, and they like back themselves away and sacrifice themselves. That robot was part of that squad with Haroon. So like John David Washington probably knew that robot too. So I would have liked to see his relationship with all of these characters.
Yeah.
They forgot to film it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It'll be in the 4-hour Edwards cut.
But yeah, he was a straight double. That's why I was like saying earlier, like it was so hard to know who to root for and all that, because he was a straight double agent pretty much. Yeah. I mean, like on the bridge, like the bridge scene, like you mentioned, Austin, with the suicide bomber AIs like running across the bridge, and you had the one sequence where Alpha O he stops one of the bombers mid track, and then he ends up, or John David Washington ends up shooting the other sergeant on the bridge, because I guess he was aiming at Ken Watanabe, I think. So
no, he was aiming at AO,
or maybe he was aiming at AO. Okay,
right? Because like there was like a time in the movie that he had to kill her. I forgot about that.
Yeah, I was just so confused about John Washington's like motivations as a character. I couldn't tell what he was trying to do.
So I do think it's confusing with the actual characters of who you're supposed to be rooting for. But I think the movie does make a case that the AI robots are the victims in this story.
And I agree with that. And that's what I think that's my favorite thing about it. I got like weird Tenet vibes with this movie when it came to John David Washington in both this and that. Because it's like, hey, here's our main character. We're going to tell you literally zero about him, but we expect you to root for him and love him. And I'm like, at the end of both movies, I'm like, how and why would I do that? So that's the weird thing. It's like, he's such a good actor, and he's so good in both those movies I just named, and this one too, of course. But I don't know. I just don't think these are the right roles for him. Because I'm like, why? Why?
Yeah.
He's good at action, though.
He looked
good in all the action scenes.
Everything. I'm a big fan of his. I'm a big fan. It's just in like Tenet and this specifically, I'm like, well, I guess maybe you're going to work with these like great directors, but other than that, I don't see the point.
I liked early on his interactions with AO.
Sure.
Whenever he's like, you want to play a game, help your friend not get murdered by the police.
Mm-hmm.
Like that stuff I thought was fun. We just never got to like the heartwarming side of it until the last 7 minutes of the movie.
It was very weird that like they jumped from that scene to like basically nothing of substance in the middle and then that at the end. And it was like, oh, okay. Wish we got more of this.
So we should touch on the big reveal that gets glossed over, which is the original Pearl Harbor of this movie, the LA nuking. Ken Watanabe reveals it was a human coding error that caused the bomb to go off. And everybody was lied to about the initial cause of the war because the West didn't want to admit that a human accidentally bombed.
Just as a premise, the idea of an AI telling a human, hey, that crazy event that happened, that wasn't AI, that was human error. And now, because you all think it was AI, you hate all of us. And it's like a very like great piece of writing, I think, because we're all now in 2023 scared about AI. But there is like a fun like element of writing where they're like, well, hey, you know, if we got introduced, what if AI was totally cool? What if they were like peacekeepers and all that, and they didn't do anything wrong, but because they could be blamed on something, they were blamed on something. And then you find out like decades later, oh no, that was the humans. It's like, fuck. Like pretty cool. Pretty cool.
In that same scene, it's such good delivery from Ken Watanabe when he goes, do you know what's going to happen when we win this war? Nothing, because we just want to be free. We're not going to retaliate. I thought that was perfect.
Yeah. Oh, man. Pretty crazy. I forgot about that reveal, Austin, to be honest. That's a huge reveal.
Well, it's 30 seconds of the movie, so
yeah.
That's the problem with all the reveals.
It never comes up. It never comes up again. It's never brought up. Even when John David Washington is talking with the government officials or any of that, he has an opportunity to say, hey, did you know the AI didn't nuke LA? And it's never brought up.
He was
like,
busy.
Oh, okay,
he was
cool.
busy. He forgot. But it's like, that's the great stuff about this movie. It's like, I don't know. Clearly the writers had like great ideas, but they only settled on them for like 30 seconds or a minute at a time. And it's like, no, this is what it should be. Like, kind of expand the premise a bit more. I think this movie would have been an all-timer potentially, but you know.
Yeah. Well, then I think the writers probably saw like the cool tech and like explosions, and they're like, well, we got to spend more time there.
Holy shit. Yeah. All right, everybody. Before we close out here, let's get into some Arnies Podcast Awards. Of course, this is the part of our show where we take something from the thing we just talked about, whether it be positive, negative, or something in between. It's just something that we think deserves a specific award. So, Austin and Keith, what do you think the creator deserves an award for?
Yeah, I'm going to give the future $300 Lego playset award to the Nomad, because this thing is going to be the hottest Christmas gift this year. You're going to want to build that Nomad out of Legos.
Unfortunately, this movie failed. I think they're going to put out that Lego set. There's going to be nobody except Austin that buys it. It's going to be...
The Nomad looks so cool alone, though, that kids are going to see it and be like, oh, wow, I need the Nomad!
Is my favorite actor John David Washington on that? And the dad's gonna be like, how do you know John David Washington?
I can't wait to nuke some huts.
I can't wait to blow some huts, guys.
Oh no.
Get to use your blue scanner first, though.
Of course you do.
That scanner was scary.
I was scared about it.
Yeah.
What you got, Keith?
I know. What was scary? The Death Star scanner or that scanner from the Nomad?
I would say the Death Star, because I always expect, whenever I see light come out of the Death Star thing, that I'm going to die on the planet that I'm on immediately after. Whereas with the Nomad, there's potential that you could just get scanned, and I guess maybe that's it. But with the Death Star, you and your entire planet will blow up.
But then later, the man that fired that Death Star is going to kill one bad guy, and
he
then
was
be
redeemed. He's my hero, Anakin Skywalker. How dare you? He's the chosen one.
All right, I'm going to give the questionable wig award. And this goes to John David Washington. I was so confused by his hair in this scene, or in this movie, I mean. Because he has like the blonde afro going on in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And then 5 years later, he's kind of got like the cornrow dreads thing kind of going on. And then when he goes back at one point to go in to see the comatose Maya, he's got the blonde afro again. I'm like, where's this coming
versatile. From? Yeah, before he was this weird double, triple, or maybe quadruple agent, he was a hairdresser. Guys, I have a controversial award, so I'm just going to preface my award with this statement. And I know people don't love this, but I am a Q-tip user when it comes to my ears. I know people say...
You're pushing it deeper.
I know they say you shouldn't use it.
Deeper. You got to get some suction.
But Austin, are you guys Q-tip users? Very quickly, I need to know.
No.
Every now and then.
I will say this, regardless of my Q-tip use, when I saw the simulants and their kind of like ear area being these like crazy like robot AI hole things, I was like, I just want to put a Q-tip in there. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Well, with that, everybody, thank you all so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you hit that follow button so you never miss our upcoming content. Also, if you wouldn't mind sharing this with a friend, we would appreciate that to continue to grow our show. Please leave us reviews as well. Even if you want to write anything, leaving us a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever your podcast really does help us out. At the Arnies is our social, and the Arnies.media is the website. We'll be back next Tuesday with another episode.
And last week, Matt and I got together to put out our thoughts and predictions for the Ahsoka finale. So if you want to hear us talk about kind of the middle of that show, be sure to go check that episode out. And Matt, I haven't seen the Ahsoka finale yet, but I just want to know, answer me one question. Did any of our predictions come correct?
None. I don't think really any of our theories came true. Bits and pieces of them did. But all I can say is there's been talks about Ahsoka Season 2 now. We already knew there was a movie coming out later, but now they're talking about a Season 2, and I'm like, I want Season 2 bad. I can't wait.
All right.
Alrighty. Looking forward to it.
Looking forward to it.
Looking forward to it. Chewie.
Harrison, is that you?
All right, and lastly, we want to hear from you guys, so please send us a message on Instagram at the Arnies or email us thearniesmedia@gmail.com. What did you think of the creator? Is this AI future about to come true? Have you ever been scared and lost in a movie theater like Matt was? Anything you say, we'll read on the show and react to it live on our latest episode.
That's right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this one. We'll see you next week. It's going to be a good one.
See ya.
Stand by, not off.